if you have a college degree, didn't have clarity in which major, and so now you're just into the problem where, okay, I picked accounting because my dad's an accountant, or my uncle's an accountant, or my mom's an accountant, and they told me that it was a great stable career, that I would have a lot of jobs after college, and that led to me picking accounting. So then I go into a big four accounting firm. Let's say you got lucky and got a great job, and now you're making good money, and you're on this track to become a partner, or you're on track to go in and becoming a controller or a CFO at a smaller company. But yes, on paper everything looks great, but maybe they're not fulfilled.
Before we start the show, I have a quick question for you. Is your resume stuck in the rejection pile? At Resume Assassin, I create powerful resumes that showcase your skills, experience, and achievements, getting you noticed by recruiters. I'll also optimize your LinkedIn profile, transforming it into a magnet for opportunity. Visit resumeassassin.com today and take charge of your job search. Visit resumeassassin.com. Welcome back to the show. The topic that we're going to discuss today has been on my mind a lot lately. I've spoken with a lot of clients that tell me that they just aren't fulfilled at their jobs anymore. And I can personally relate to this on so many different levels. I mean, I worked at a job for several years, and, honestly, I thought that I was fulfilled at the time. But I wasn't happy, I wasn't satisfied, and I couldn't really put my finger on the why, because I actually liked my job a lot, and I worked for a really prestigious organization, I would say, and there was a lot of opportunity there. My coworkers were great. I mean, the benefits were great, and I didn't really have anything to complain about at all, but, I wasn't truly happy with it. Fast forward several years later, I quit my job, and really only then did I realize that I was actually unfulfilled, and that was why I was so unhappy. And the problem is that, when most people feel unfulfilled, they just don't know what to do, or they don't know where to start. Today, Daniel Botero is here with us to talk about how to navigate the job market when you're feeling unsatisfied. Daniel, welcome to Recruiting Insider.
Mary, thank you so much for having me. Super excited to talk to you about this important topic.
Yes. Before we kind of dig into the topic, Daniel, I'd love for you to just kind of tell us a little bit about your background and how'd you get where you are today.
Sure. So for me, I always wanted to help people reach their full potential. I think I've always loved seeing when people are fulfilled and they're just on a constant state of flow. And one of the things that would make me really upset is when I would see somebody who's super talented not being good at not being successful. And so I graduated college in 2012. I went into a management training program at a Fortune 50 company, and I saw that there was a lot of people that I graduated with that were, arguably smarter, higher GPA, and all this, but they weren't getting jobs. So they weren't reaching their full potential. Or even seeing my friends who I'm in Orlando, Florida, there's tons of hospitality jobs. So they were servers, and the jobs that they were getting, they would have to take a pay cut from being a server. And so you would go into the server trap. So again, do I take the job that pays me the most, or do I take a job that's better for my career more long term? And that ultimately got me involved in recruiting at this Fortune 50 company, to the point where I started going back on campus and helping people get into this company because I was super fulfilled and I love my job. And fast forward 6 years after that, I left corporate to start my own business on helping people how to land their dream job. And so now for the last 10 years, I've just essentially been a career coach, helping people land jobs to where they feel fulfilled, and they're earning what they deserve. And, if they have a good job, that then translates into having a good personal life.
Yeah. I hear from a lot of job seekers that I work with, they feel stuck and unfulfilled in their careers, even when it seems good on paper. Mm-hmm. Can you share some insights into why this might happen?
I think a lot of times it's also like what, like if you have a college degree and maybe you didn't have clarity in which major, and so now you're just into this problem where, okay, I picked accounting. I'm picking on accounting just as an example, right?
Mm-hmm.
I picked accounting because my dad's an accountant, or my uncle's an accountant, or my mom's an accountant, and they told me that it was a great stable career, that I would have a lot of jobs after college, and that led to me picking accounting. So then I go into a big four accounting firm. Let's say you got lucky and got a great job, and now you're making good money, and you're on this track to become a partner, or you're on track to go in and becoming a controller or a CFO at a smaller company. But yes, on paper everything looks great, but maybe they're not fulfilled, and you create this domino effect. And the longer you've been in it, the harder it maybe becomes. Maybe you have bills, maybe you have kids, maybe you now have obligations that are harder for you to make that pivot. But then you're like, feel like you're dying inside. So I think it happens differently for everybody, right? But I think a very common one is picking the wrong major because of society norms or standards of, hey, it's good to be a lawyer, it's good to be an engineer, and you just don't like it.
Yeah, I think a lot of people feel like they should pursue a certain career path because it's prestigious, right? Maybe, oh, I should be a doctor, I should be a lawyer because that's where the money is at. That's where my family history is. My dad's a doctor. They want me to pursue that route. And then they do this and they get stuck in this career, maybe 10 years later, 20 years down the road, and they're unsatisfied, and they just don't know where to turn. They don't know what to do from there. So how do you help your clients really find that clarity and navigate that next step, or I should say that first step in finding a new career?
So I think it's important to not rush the clarity stage. So like when I think about job searching, I think about it, let's break it down into 5 steps. Like, the best way to run a marathon is 1 mile at a time. So let's break it down a mile per mile, right? So you have clarity, like what's the right job to apply for? What's the right fit for me, right? Like clarity on what I want, what motivates me. Am I motivated by compensation, work-life balance, location, industry, like all these other things, right? So that's step one. Step number 2, I would say, is visibility. So that's where your resume comes in, your LinkedIn comes in. Step number 3 is networking. I think even now that, where the internet has made it so easy for you to apply online, has made it very difficult for you to get noticed, because back when I was like 16 years old looking for my first job, I had to go to a physical location and apply, right?
Yeah.
So
Right.
that meant that location, or that that supermarket, when I was getting my first job, only had 20 applicants, right?
Yeah.
For the whole month.
Right,
now,
exactly.
Walmart puts an application and there'll be 1,000 people apply, because it's the ease, right? So networking becomes important. So then networking, that's step 3. Step 4 is interviewing. You have to interview, no matter if you have a referral. Like even if you are the CEO's kid, usually you have to still interview for the role. And then step number 5 is salary negotiation. And so when we talk about that, I think it's really easy when we're in a point of desperation or in a point of need, because whether desperately I'm like feeling very depressed on my current job, or desperately I need to get a job because I got laid off, or I'm fired, or I quit and I have bills to pay.
Yeah.
We want to go to thinking, what's the path of less resistance? Let me just go ahead and apply and interview, and we skip clarity and networking. And so I think, to me, is don't skip steps. Just don't skip steps, and really, if anything, take your time and clarity, because it will save you time in the long run.
Yeah, I couldn't agree with you more. I think a lot of people, they don't take the time to really get that clarity, and they just start jumping in and applying to hundreds and hundreds of different types of opportunities, and then they're like, wait, what's going wrong? I'm not hearing back. It's because their clarity isn't there. Their job search strategy is just, it's not on point. So let's dig into those 5 steps just a little bit deeper. So for any of our listeners who are like, oh, I'm just so unsatisfied. I have a family to feed. I know I need a good salary, but I'm also need to think about my own mental health, and I'm ready to move on. I'm ready to do something different. What could they do to start gaining that clarity?
I would say clarity is easier for some more than others, right? probably been blessed with having clarity my whole life on what I wanted to do. On the other side of the coin, I would say my wife is the type of person who is good at a lot of things, but never knows exactly what she wanted to do until very recently. So she's, and maybe you guys listening to this might relate to her more than you would relate to my story, where I knew I wanted to study business. I never changed majors. My wife, on the other hand, started in public relations, then went to accounting, then changed to finance, and ended up in finance, right? So like, and that's actually more common than not. 60% of college students changed majors. So like, that's more than the majority change majors at one point or another, let alone change careers after they graduate. So I think it's important to understand how much help do you really need in clarity, and it's okay to get help, right? Sometimes you don't need help. Like sometimes, again, you have full clarity and you can go ahead and move on to the next stage. Sometimes you might want to go from one extreme, like one point where it's free, maybe ChatGPT, upload your resume, upload some job descriptions to that ChatGPT, act like a career counselor. What advice do you have, right? Like, use some technology out there. Another thing is take some personality assessments. There's a lot of them. Again, I'm not sponsored by any of them. There's one called my favorite one called the Kobe A assessment. There's an attachment to that assessment that will recommend careers based on your MO and your modus Myers-Briggs. So there's a lot of this like assessments that measure different, like whether it's your MO, your modus operandi, or your personality, or things like that can help pinpoint you to different career paths that you might have never realized, right? That are good. Or even work with a career coach that specializes in pivoting. And there's a lot of great ones out there. I'm definitely not that person, but like there's definitely some good ones out there. And if you need help finding them, just shoot me a message on LinkedIn. But like any of them, just start with not rushing through step one.
Yeah, because I think a lot of people that I speak with, they know that they want something different, but they don't know what that is. And they're like, at this point, I don't know what's out there. I've been in finance for 20 years, right? And I don't know what I want to do. So I think Daniel's right. Maybe explore ChatGPT. If you don't want to, invest, money into some of these assessments, just upload your resume, copy paste your resume in there and get some ideas and then jump on LinkedIn and start doing some research. See what types of job opportunities are out there that are related to some of these different areas that you might be interested in. And I think that skills assessments are really, really important too, especially for those of you who may have never taken a skills assessment. It can really shed light on, what are your strengths? What are your areas of interest? And what are some of the jobs that are on the market currently that might be related to those areas? And that's a great starting point to, kind of explore and see what's out there. So then,
I was going to say one thing before we move on to that. I think I would say, the way you're probably feeling, there's so many others that feel the same way. And it's interesting. I know a lot of career coaches, and I'm going to show you guys some examples. I have a friend who has a very successful career coaching program that helps people break into medical sales. And Mary, you wouldn't believe the two most common industries that his clients come from: nurses and teachers. Yeah. So I understand nurses. Like I get nurses saying, "Hey, I don't want to do patient care. This is too stressful. I want to use that, still make impact. So I'll go to medical sales." I would have never guessed teachers, right? And he explained to me that to be a very successful medical sales rep, you need two qualities. You need to be a good teacher, and you need to know the science. So teachers know how to teach. So companies have no problem spending time teaching the teachers the science aspect of it. And then nurses know the science, and they just teach them how to teach. And so I also have another, and I'm just going to give you guys 3 examples so you guys can see how amazing this is. I have another career coach friend who helps individuals who are in ministry, who maybe worked as a pastor, children's pastor, youth pastor, any of this, or pastor, and they're got in a stage in their life where they need more income because the church doesn't pay as well, and they have kids going to college, so they want to transition that into corporate. So he helps them get managers and director roles, right? Okay. And so it's super interesting to see all this correlations or these changes. Also, like, those are some examples there of like nurses, teachers, pastors, of making pivots, and for whatever reason, whether it's, hey, I just need more money, like I'm the pastor, or I picked nursing because it was a good degree, it was a good career to go into, but now I'm not fulfilled. It's just interesting that
that's super interesting. And I wouldn't have put my finger on, maybe nurses going into medical devices, but not teachers. But I think it makes sense when you break it down, because it's like, what are you doing in medical device? Well, you're teaching nurses and you're teaching physicians or surgeons how to use these medical devices. So these teachers have these really great, skills in educating students that they can transfer into that space. And the same with pastors. I mean, man, pastors are managing the business of the church, right? They're managing the operations, the people, the finances, the programs, everything that goes along with it. So there are so many different transferable skills. I mean, for those of you that are thinking it's time for me to take that next step, to go somewhere else, to do something else, and you feel like you don't have those transferable skills, you do. You just, you need to do that, find that clarity, and then you need to do some of that deep soul searching to figure out, what is it that I offer and how is that relatable or transferable into, the career that I want. Even if you're staying in the same industry and taking the next step up, how do my leadership skills and the skills that I've gained within my current role translate into that next step up and that next opportunity?
Yeah, no, 100%.
Yeah, so visibility is the kind of the second piece of the puzzle. So once we've got that clarity nailed down, we kind of, we've broken it down, we know exactly what we want to do, where we want to go. How do we get visible?
So I think this is a really big one, because I think this is how you stand out, right? So visible, one, resume, right? That is not going away anytime soon, right? You need to have a good resume that it's not only about trying to be that ATS, but also that communicates your skill sets and you're able to get to the interview, right? But aside from that, you also need to work on your digital resume, which is your LinkedIn profile. Different companies, but it's in different studies show like 60-70% of recruiters look at LinkedIn, look at individuals' LinkedIn before making a hiring decision or even bringing them into the interview. So you need to make sure that your LinkedIn profile is there. And I would say those are the basics, right? Like the basics at bare minimum to have a really good, strong resume. And you probably have spoken and speak about this way more, so I won't dive into resumes here. But then you have LinkedIn. That's really crucial and really important as well.
Yeah.
But aside from that, the visibility is getting in front of those decision makers that are making those decisions. Like I mentioned earlier, because it's so easy to apply for jobs online, and every job board, whether it's LinkedIn, Indeed, Monster, they have some sort of easy apply button, right? Easy apply button is called on LinkedIn, but makes it really easy. And so what you want to do is get visibility, right? And so it's going and proactively reaching out to the recruiters, the hiring managers, the individuals that have the job that you just applied to, so your potential coworkers, to get visibility. And that kind of leads us to which is the next stage, which is networking, which is step number 3. And just really quick there, networking is very, very important to get you in front of the right person. And I would say that, majority of people do not network. Like if again, I throw you data that I looked into research a lot on this, right? 80% of people don't network. They just simply apply. And so you're talking about when you're networking, you're already setting yourself apart. But within the 20% of people that are networking, most of them are just going to recruiters. So if I can give you guys some ninja tips here, right? Is you want to go and target people who have the same job title that you just applied to, because most likely they are going to have way more in common with you, right? So people are more likely to reply if there's a lot of commonality between you. They always say go to the alumni of your university. The reason that works is because of the commonality, right?
Yeah.
And so if you are messaging someone that has the same job title that you just applied, they're a lot more likely to know who the manager is, and they're a lot more likely to know the recruiter. And also, just to give you guys some tips, check if they're active on LinkedIn before you waste your messages. So because they're on LinkedIn doesn't mean that they're active. Yeah. And then the third tip that I would tell you is the least amount of time they've been in the company, the more likely they are to reply. Right, so if I go and I want to apply for a data analyst at Disney, and that person's been at Disney for 15 years, it looks like he's probably very happy with his career at Disney, so he's maybe not checking LinkedIn at all, right? Because usually people who are not as happy with their job or are looking, or they're using it for sales or for some other reason, selfish reason, right? Like are on LinkedIn. But if I just noticed that, hey, Mary, you've been working at Disney for 3 months, you're still probably active on LinkedIn because it's been a habit of being active on LinkedIn because you were very active every day when you were looking for a job. 2, you know exactly how the hiring process is. You just went through it. And so 3, you're super proud of yourself for getting that job at Disney. So now you want to tell the world about it, and I'm just a way to tell it. And 4, you know who the recruiter is because you just went through that experience with the recruiters that are recruiting for this role.
Yeah, I think networking can be the best way to get your foot in the door, especially in a job market that's so saturated. I mean, you can do everything to become visible. Like you said, Daniel, I think, of course, your resume and your LinkedIn profile are a key piece of the puzzle, and just making sure that you're getting into the hands of the hiring manager, landing at the top of the search results during those recruiter searches online. Those are so critical. But I think that the networking piece, I think the statistic that you shared with us, with 80% of people are not using the power of networking, I think this is kind of a wake-up call for anybody that's listening right now. It's like, be part of that 20% that are networking, because you could open up so many different doors of opportunities in doing that. And so I'm curious, because you used the example of, don't just necessarily connect with recruiters, but also connect with people that are in the job title of the position that you're currently seeking. So if you are pursuing a data analyst role at Disney and you want to try to connect with somebody who's active on LinkedIn that has that current title, what are some ways to get the attention of that person and actually have them accept that connection request from us?
Yeah. So I think that the best way to go through an interview process is understanding that the companies need you just as much as you need them. And so you need to interview them just as much as they interview you. And I understand that the way the system is built doesn't feel that way. But the reality is, if you talk to any entrepreneur who's hiring, or any CEO or any manager, they struggle to find top talent. Not talent. No, there's people applying. Great talent, right? And so whenever you can start the relationship and networking from a point of view of like, hey, I am considering applying at Disney. I am considering of, bringing my talent to Disney in a sense, right? And you're interviewing them and you're trying to understand about the culture, the manager, the experience, the role, all this, things. You'll be surprised how people now turn and try to tell you and sell you on the idea. So with all that being said, like, there's a 5-step process to go from a stranger to a referral. And I would say number 1 is commonality. The more you have in common with someone, the more likely they are to reply. Did they go to the same university? Are they from the same hometown as you? Did they have the same major as you, right? Like, anything that can, like, do they volunteer at the same nonprofit organization than you? Like, maybe they're part of the same, like, church as you, and they just put that there in their LinkedIn or somewhere, and you're able to find that information. Anything that starts a conversation, the more in common you have, the more. So that's step number 1. Step number 2 is make the first conversation about them. You see, as humans, we're selfish creatures. So like, we're always going to want to make it about us. I need a job, so Mary, can you give me a job? And so instead, flip it around and say, like, hey, Mary, came across your profile, noticed that we both went to UCF, right? Would love to connect. So step 1. Step 2, Mary, notice that you've been at Disney for 3 months, and before there, you worked at Universal Studios. Congratulations. What's been your favorite part about working at Disney, right? I just made it about you. Yep. And now once she replies, I want to still ask Mary about questions about Disney that I want to know about. But if I go like, hey, Hey, Mary, tell me, like, what's the interview process at Disney is like, or hey, Mary, what's the culture at Disney? You're gonna tell me that from your perspective and your point of view. So if I just ask you the questions, hey, Mary, what was your favorite part about your interview process at Disney, or what's been your favorite part about working at Disney? I'm still gonna get the same answer.
Yep.
Right. But I made it about you, so you're more likely to reply. So step 2, make it about them first. Step 3, this is where like it's like you're playing chess when they're playing checkers, right? Is you ask for a small piece of advice that takes very little on their part, but a little bit of commitment on your part. So I would be like, Mary, is there a book that you would recommend for me to improve my data and analytical skills that would be impressive to Disney maybe in the future? Or is there a YouTube channel or a documentary or a trade magazine, or is there an influencer, or is there X, Y, and Z, or is there a podcast that I should listen to if I want to improve my resume writing, right? And so 10 seconds of you giving me, hey, Daniel, check out this podcast and check out this book. And I say the book first because I love reading, so it's an easy way to get it started. And so you say that you recommend me the book. So step 3, you ask for a piece of advice. It's called open the feedback loop. I ask for a piece of advice. I either, depending on how big that advice is, reading a book is a 4 to 5 hour commitment depending on the size. I can go like a week later and be like, Mary, thank you so much for that recommendation of the book. I've gone ahead and I've already read the first 50 pages. And by the way, it's awesome. Here's what I learned, right? So now, because I got advice, I now have an excuse to get the conversation back and going. But what I did there is I just proved to the person I'm networking with that I won't waste their time, that I respect them, and that I will listen to any advice they give me. You know, obviously that it's relevant, right? Which then takes us to step number 4, which is a resume review, right? So if I've already identified a role in Disney, right, I want to then message the person who has the same job title, go through this process, and now I'd be like, hey, Mary, you know, thank you so much for answering your questions about your experience at Disney. Disney is an amazing company. I found this role, which I think I'll be great for, but before I submit my application, do you mind just reviewing my resume? And at this point, because you've already proven to Mary or to anyone that you trust their advice, now they feel like they won't waste their time if they gave you a review, because you're going to go and execute the changes. And so 2 things could happen there. 1, they can be like, hey, Daniel, your resume looks great, right? Or, hey, Daniel, I would change this, right? And by the way, you give your resume to 10 people and you get 10 different things. That's what happens,
for
right?
sure.
And so everyone has their own perspective. But at this point, you want Mary's perspective, or you want the person who you're networking's perspective. And so once they give you the thumbs up, you say, great, thank you so much. Or, hey, I made the changes, which moves on to step 5, which is asking for a referral without asking for a referral, which then you would say something like, okay, thanks, Mary. I'm going to go ahead and apply. But as you know, Disney is such a competitive company. What way would any advice you can give me on how to get my application visibility? All I am looking for is an opportunity to interview. Once we ask for advice, then that's step 3, open the feedback loop. We close the loop by going back and saying, hey, thanks for recommending that book, right? And and here's what I've learned. And then you can start, which is step 4, resume review. You can say, hey, by the way, during that time I read my book, I started looking into Disney more. I found this role that I want to apply. Do you mind just reviewing my resume before I submit the application? Right? So then you get a quick resume review. In that sense, if they say, hey, your resume looks good, you know you got their stamp of approval. If they're like giving you recommendations, make sure you fix it. It's really important that they feel like they're bought in and they're part of the process. And then right before you apply, step 5 is you say, hey, thank you so much for the review. I've made the changes. I'm glad you like it. Now, I know how competitive Disney is, or X company is. Before I hit submit, is there any advice that you can give me on how I can get more visibility to my application? All I am looking for is an opportunity to interview. And the key there is not asking for a referral. They'll know. If they feel comfortable enough, they'll bring it up. They're going to be monetary compensated by their company. Most companies have a referral system. Or if they're not, they might say, hey, connect. This is the recruiter you should speak to, or this is the manager of the role, or connect with this person. And so that's kind of ultimately how you get more visibility. Because what you want to do if you're listening to this is you want to get to the interview some way or another. If you can get to the interview, you've already beaten over 90% of other applicants, because most people are eliminated before the interview process even begins. And so this whole 5-step process of 1, commonality, 2, making it about them, 3, opening the feedback loop, 4, asking for a resume review, and 5, asking for visibility is your fastest, most efficient way that I've found in my 10 years of career coaching on how to get to the interview utilizing networking.
This is gold. I hope that everybody out there is, got their pen and their paper and they're writing this down, because this is, honestly, it's so simple, but it's genius, because it's like, number 1, find something in common with the person. You don't want to just go and try to blindly connect with them, just send them a request and then jump into their, into their inbox, into their in-mail, like, hey, Daniel, can you do this for me? Can you do that for me? Because you're not going to be welcomed. They're not going to welcome you into their community if you do that. So find that commonality with them. Make the first conversation about them, like Daniel said. Ask them for a piece of advice, because then that you're showing them, hey, you're the expert at Disney. What can you tell me? What can I learn from you? Get them talking about themselves. That's always a good strategy. And then, the resume review piece too is, you're starting to kind of go from, hey, who are you? What can I do for you? To, hey, I actually am also looking for a job at Disney. Yeah. Can you review my resume? Right. So it's kind of pivoting the relationship there just a little bit by asking them to do that resume review. And then asking for the referral without asking them for the referral is also genius, because if you mention to them that you're applying to the position and you've already built the relationship, you've read the book, right? You've done all the things, then more than likely they're going to pick up that hint and they're going to be like, hey, I'd love to give you a referral, because you've done the work. You've done the legwork to build that relationship. You've made it about them. You haven't made it about you. So I think, if you follow all of these steps that you're talking about here today, Daniel, I think that a lot of you out there, especially if you're just, kind of part of that 80% of people that are just applying through company websites and you're not really doing any networking, maybe because you don't really know how to do it. If you try this method, let us know. Let us know how it works, because we'd love to know, if, I think that, honestly, I think that it's genius. So, now that we've kind of learned some strategies for, how can we get that visibility? How can we network and start reaching out to people that could potentially, help us out along the way and help us get our foot in the door at Disney? And we actually land that interview. What then? We haven't, prepped for interview for 20 years. What's our first step here?
I think the first step here is going back to understanding that they need you more than you need them. Like, trust me. Like, and so you cannot be afraid to interview them back. And I am telling you this as someone who was a hiring manager for a 50 company, who has interviewed thousands of people. I now have a team of 27 people. My favorite people to want to hire are the ones who are interviewing me back. They're like, Daniel, why should I work here? Like, why would someone consider building a career here, right? And so it's important to interview them back. But with that being said, let's break this down into actionable steps, kind of like everything that we've talked about so far. 1, it's doing the proper research, right? Proper preparation prevents poor performance. Do you know the company, the role, and the person that's interviewing? Understand that the way that a recruiter is interviewing you is very different than what the manager of the department's doing it. They might ask you the same questions because they have the same interview guide that they're following, but they're looking at it from their point of view. The recruiter is looking to fill the role and making sure that you can do the job. The manager is going to say, okay, can you do the job? Check, but can I spend with you 40 hours plus a week, right? That also becomes really important. Aside from like the prep side of it, I think it's important to go to the interview and understanding how to answer behavioral questions. I think like, looking how to answer through the STAR method. You can do some of that. Like, you can YouTube that. I don't know if you've covered that into more details in other podcasts. But here's the biggest mistakes that I see people don't do is that they don't ask for feedback. So like, what I want you guys to understand is always finish the interview with the following question. And I'm going to warn you, it is going to be very awkward when you ask this question. But this question is going to be a game changer. Is there any particular reason why you think I might not be a good fit for this role? So you go through the interview, right? And let's say, Mary, you're interviewing me for this Disney, for data analyst role. And you say, Daniel, I don't have any more questions. Usually they'll be like, do you have any questions? You want to ask at least 3 questions, right? You want to interview them back. Ask a question about the role. Ask a question about the company. Ask a question about the interviewer. And then, as the last question, say, Mary, again, I want to thank you for the opportunity to interview for this role. Based on my research and our conversation, I am very excited for the opportunity to build a career in your team and with Disney. But is there any particular reasons why you think I might not be a good fit? And let's break it down what can happen in this scenario. So best case scenario, Mary, you can come to me and say, Daniel, no, I think you're a great fit, right? Like, no reasons why. And so then you just follow up, say, hey, I'm so glad that you think that way. What are next steps? Next steps meaning could be another interview. Next steps could be like, hey, you're gonna get an offer in an email. Like, let me work with finance and try to, we'll gather the usually they won't give you they'll maybe give you a verbal, but you want a written offer. Great. Will it always happen that way, ladies and gentlemen? No. Let's say majority of the time it won't happen that way. So let's talk about worst case scenario. Or middle case scenario. So, hey, is there any particular reasons why you think I might not be a good fit for this role? They might say, hey, we're still interviewing other candidates. So they don't tell you no, but they don't tell you yes, right? So you say, hey, totally understand. When would be a good time for me to follow up? Again, I'm extremely interested about this process, right? So now at least they'll like, hey, follow up with me in 2 weeks, or you at least could now have a little bit of a timeline but about what to do next. Now, worst case scenario. They say, hey, Daniel, unfortunately, I don't think you would be a good fit. And here's the thing. Companies suck at giving you feedback, but when you ask this question, you catch them off guard, especially if it's not an HR person who doesn't know, don't give feedback. They will give you feedback, right? And so they'll probably say like, hey, Daniel, you don't have enough X, Y, and Z. Now, when they say that to you, I think it's important for you to quickly understand is this a skill that we can close within weeks, or is this a skill like a lack of or the gap that we're trying to close gonna take it's just gonna take a year or so? Like, I just don't know Python, so then I'm not gonna be a good fit for this role. Yeah. If it's something that I feel either I already have and I just didn't communicate through my resume or my interview, I want to overcome that. I want to be like, hey, I totally understand where you're coming from, that I don't have enough Python skills, but maybe that you might think that I don't have enough Python skills, but I maybe forgot to communicate that I have 2 years of experience working in Python in a job that I didn't put on my resume because it didn't fit, or I have a certification in Python, or X, Y, and Z. So you can have one opportunity to overcome it. Now, let's say that you don't have this skill set. Like, the gap is too big. Like, you're just underqualified for the role, and you guys only realize this into the interview. Then you can acknowledge and say, hey, I understand I don't have Python, but is there any other role within the organization that you think I'll be a better fit for? And you would be surprised of how many of my clients have been able to gain a job where originally we're going to get rejected for this one, and the manager was like, hey, now that you think about it, my friend who I have lunch with, this is a real life story for Salesforce, right? My friend is actually hiring for someone with a profile like yours. Let me make the introduction.
Wow. Right?
And so what that question allows you to do is that you have clarity. Yeah. Even if it's a worst case scenario, and say, you know what, Mary, I'm sorry, you're just not a good fit. At least now you don't have to wait for 2 weeks to get rejected. You can just move forward and start applying and start going and start doing this all over again. But at a best case scenario, you can overcome that objection, or even say, okay, I totally understand that I'm not a good fit for this role, but you have to also understand that there's not saying no to you forever. They're saying no to you today for this role, for this moment. And when you can open it up this way, you just will never know what happens in the next couple of weeks. Because I've also been in the other side where I've said no to a candidate, hired somebody else, ran a background check on my number one choice, That person didn't pass the background check. I can't hire them no matter what. It's a PepsiCo policy. And now I can go back to candidate B who was very grateful at the end and say, hey, we've reconsidered. We want to hire you. But if you end in good terms like that, then that door's still open.
Wow. Another secret tip here from Daniel, and I just love the idea. I mean, first of all, in an interview, I think that it's, like you kind of briefly mentioned in the beginning there, it's so important to also interview the interviewer. Try to make it a conversation as much as you possibly can. But then that question at the end, it's so deep, it's so personal. I could see that just catching the interviewer off guard. Like you said, the HR person, maybe they're a little more trained in how to handle something like that. But man, what kind of a creative way to figure out, to kind of get inside the brain of the hiring manager really, and to see what they really think. And it's a good way to, like you said, to kind of overcome that objection. If, there's maybe a certain skill that they really, really want in this position, but you don't have that experience, or you don't have that, that hard skill that they're looking for. Or maybe, like you said, you do have that hard skill. They didn't see it on your resume. They don't know it. So you can overcome that objection. Or, even better, if it's not a good fit, you can find different opportunities within that same company that could still be a really, really good fit for you and for the company. So the last piece of the puzzle, we won't dig too deep into salary negotiation. And actually, I just recorded an episode on salary negotiation. So, a couple, I'll drop a link in the show notes here, so you can listen a little bit more about salary negotiation too. But I think that we've had such a powerful conversation today, Daniel, with so many amazing takeaways and actionable steps that people can literally start implementing today. So I guess as we wrap up, what's one key takeaway that you'd like our listeners to remember if they're, feeling unfulfilled in their careers and they're ready to take that next step?
I would just say, talk to people. Like, odds are you're not the only one dealing with this. It feels like that. Maybe no one around you in your inner circle is dealing with this, so you feel very alone. But I can tell you that there's a lot of people that probably feel the same way you do. So talk to them, and talk to people not only that are feeling that way, that felt that way, have overcome it. I do think that the best way to reach any goal is to learn from someone who's done it. So if you're an accountant and you always wanted to go to sales, and so find accountants who went to sales and ask them, just have a coffee chat before applying, like, hey, what's been your journey? And I think that, if, at least for me, like, success leaves clues. And if I can see somebody who's done what I want to do, and I see multiple people do that, I realize, like, okay, they're human just like I am, and there isn't, like, yeah, they're great, but there isn't anything that's so special that I can't do myself. And I think that's always been very helpful to me, and even my clients who have sometimes imposter syndrome, when I can give them examples of, like, hey, like, this 3 other job seekers did it, you could do it too. Like, yes, they're great and they're smart, but so are you. You just have to believe in yourself, because I think a lot of times when we are in this anxiety or depression, or we feel like we're in this black hole, the first thing is to start seeing that there's examples that people can get out of it, and then go and double listen to this podcast and follow the actionable little tips. But that doesn't matter if you can't start digging yourself out of this hole.
Yeah, wonderful. Amazing. Well, Daniel, where can we find you on social media?
LinkedIn. Just Daniel Botero on LinkedIn. I'm pretty confident I'll be one of the top searches there. And if you have anything that I can support you with, just send me a message on LinkedIn.
Awesome. Thank you so much for coming on today.
Absolutely. Thanks for having me.
Thanks for listening. I will be releasing episodes every Monday, so be sure to subscribe on the platform that you are watching this, give it a 5-star review, and we'll see you next time.